When I first moved to New York City, I thought finding an apartment would be my biggest challenge. The city was supposed to be the land of opportunity, right? At least, that's what I told myself as I scrolled through Craigslist ads, desperately searching for a place that didn't look like a crime scene. I came across an ad that caught my attention one evening after work. Roommate wanted $500 per month. No questions. My eyes widened. In a city where even a shoebox could cost you $1,000, this was a steal. The pictures looked decent, too. A small but clean apartment with 2 bedrooms, a shared bathroom, and a cozy-looking living room. I dialed the number on the ad and held my breath as it rang. After a few seconds, a woman's voice answered, sounding as if she'd been asleep. Hello. Hi. I'm calling about the Craigslist ad for the room? Oh, right. The room. Are you free to see it tonight? Her voice was monotonous, almost robotic. I hesitated. There was something about her tone that felt off, but I brushed it aside. I was desperate. Sure, I replied. She gave me the address and I jotted it down quickly. It was in a quiet neighborhood in Brooklyn, not too far from where I worked. Perfect. I agreed to meet her at 8 p.m. When I arrived, the apartment building looked normal enough, a bit run down, but that wasn't uncommon in Brooklyn. I rang the buzzer for apartment 3B. A few seconds later, the door clicked open and I stepped inside. The woman who answered the door was a few years older than me, maybe in her early 30s. She had long, dark hair that hung over her shoulders, and her eyes seemed to pierce right through me. Come in, she said, stepping aside. The apartment looked just like the photos. Clean, sparse, almost too neat. It felt like a show apartment, not a place someone actually lived in. The woman, who introduced herself as Lily, motioned for me to sit on the couch. So, why do you need a place? She asked. I explained my situation. Fresh out of college, new job, trying to make it in the city. She nodded, listening intently but saying very little. Finally, after a long pause, she smiled. You seem like a good fit. You can move in tomorrow if you want. I was taken aback by how quickly she made her decision. Just like that? Don't you want to know more about me? She shrugged. I'm not picky. I just need someone to help cover the rent. As long as you don't bring any trouble, it's fine. It seemed too good to be true, but I ignored the red flags. I needed this place. I needed to get out of the dingy motel I was staying at. I'll take it, I said. Moving in was easy. I didn't have much stuff, just a few suitcases and some boxes. Lily helped me carry them up the stairs, her expression never changing. As I unpacked in my new room, I noticed something odd. The door had no lock. In fact, none of the doors in the apartment had locks, not even the bathroom. It struck me as strange, but I reasoned that maybe it was an old building quirk. The first few days went smoothly. Lily was quiet, kept to herself mostly. She worked odd hours and often wasn't home, which suited me fine. I liked having the place to myself. I did my best to keep things tidy and respect her space. But then, things started happening. Started small. I would come home from work, and the lights would be on, even though I was sure I had turned them off. Then my belongings began to shift. A book would be on the table instead of the shelf. My toothbrush moved to the opposite side of the sink. I brushed it off as forgetfulness, the stress of my new job maybe. But one night, I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. My heart raced as I sat up in bed, squinting into the darkness. The door was ajar, a thin sliver of light from the hallway spilling into my room. I could have sworn I closed it before going to sleep. Lily, I called out, my voice shaky. There was no response. I got up and walked to the door, peering out into the hallway. It was empty. I closed the door, making sure it latched this time, and crawled back into bed, my skin prickling with unease. The incidents continued, each one more unsettling than the last. I started hearing noises at night, soft shuffling sounds outside my door. Sometimes it sounded like whispering, too low to make out the words. I asked Lily about it one morning over breakfast, trying to keep my voice casual. Do you ever hear strange noises at night? She didn't look up from her coffee. Old buildings make noise. You'll get used to it. Her answer was dismissive, but something in her tone made my skin crawl. There was something she wasn't telling me, something she didn't want me to know. One night, I woke up to the feeling of being watched. It was a cold, suffocating sensation, like a weight pressing down on my chest. My eyes flew open, and I saw a shadow standing in the doorway, just a few feet away from my bed. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I fumbled for the lamp on my bedside table, my fingers trembling. The light flicked on, and the shadow was gone. The doorway was empty. I got up, my legs shaking, and checked the hallway. Lily's door was closed. I listened for any sounds, any sign that she was awake, but there was nothing, just silence. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone in that apartment. The next day, I decided to confront Lily. I waited until she got home, then cornered her in the kitchen. "Is there something you're not telling me?" I demanded. "I've been hearing things, seeing things. I need to know what's going on." Lily looked at me, her expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought she wasn't going to answer, but then she sighed and set her mug down. "I didn't think you'd notice," she said quietly. "What are you talking about?" I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. Lily hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. "This apartment, it's not just us here." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I felt my mouth go dry. "What do we do?" I asked finally. Lily shook her head. "I don't know, but we have to be careful. It doesn't like it when we notice it. It doesn't like it when we talk about it." The following nights were a blur of terror and sleeplessness. I started to see things out of the corner of my eye, shadows that moved when they shouldn't. One night, I woke up to find a message scrawled on the wall of my bedroom, written in what looked like soot or ash. The letters were jagged, almost childlike. "Leave now." I pointed to my room. "There's a message on the wall." She pushed past me and walked to my room. But when she saw the message, her face went pale. She turned to me, her eyes wide with fear. "You have to leave," she said urgently. "You have to get out now." I was in a daze as I packed my things, throwing clothes into a suitcase with shaking hands. Lily watched, her face drawn and tense. As I grabbed my last bag, I turned to her. "What about you?" She shook her head. "I can't leave. Just go. Don't look back." I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get as far away as possible. As I reached the front door, I heard Lily scream, a sound that echoed through the building and made my blood run cold. I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I ran out into the street, the cold night air hitting my face, and kept running until my lungs burned. It's been 6 months since I left that apartment. I found another place, a tiny studio in a crowded building, but I don't care. I'd rather live in a closet than go back to that place. I've tried to contact Lily, but her number is disconnected. I went back to the apartment once, just to see if she was still there, but it was empty. The building manager said no one had lived there for months, that the apartment had been vacant since the last tenant moved out. I don't know what happened to Lily, or what I saw in that apartment. Sometimes, I wonder if it was all in my head, if the stress of the move and the new job made me imagine things. But then I remember the message on the wall, the whispers in the night, and I know it was real. I still have nightmares sometimes. I see the shadow standing in my doorway, hear the whispers in my ear. I wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, and it takes me a few minutes to realize I'm safe, that I'm not in that apartment anymore. But even though I've left, I can't shake the feeling that I'm still being watched, that something followed me when I ran out that door. I keep the lights on at night now, and I lock my door. But deep down, I know that if it wants to find me, a lock won't keep it out. Some nights, I think I hear whispers outside my door, too low to understand. And I wonder if I should have left sooner, before it noticed me, before it got angry. But it's too late for that now. It's strange how quickly life can settle back into a routine, even after something so terrifying. In the months following my escape, I threw myself into my work, trying to forget what happened. But every night, As soon as the sun went down, the fear would return. My tiny studio apartment, which felt like a sanctuary in the daylight, turned into a prison of shadows after dark. I bought blackout curtains and kept them closed, convinced that someone, or something, might be watching from outside. I tried to tell myself that I was just being paranoid, but the feeling of being watched never really went away. One night, I came home late from work. The office had been hectic, and I'd lost track of time. By the time I realized, it was almost midnight. I rushed to the subway, feeling a prickle of unease as I made my way down the nearly empty platform. The air was stale, and the fluorescent lights cast long, flickering shadows. I got off at my stop and walked the few blocks to my apartment, clutching my bag tightly. The streets were empty, the only sound the distant hum of traffic. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but every time I passed a dark alley or an unlit doorway, my heart skipped a beat. When I reached my building, I fumbled with my keys, glancing over my shoulder. I could have sworn I saw a shadow moving behind me, but when I turned, there was nothing there. Just the flickering streetlights and the empty sidewalk. I let out a shaky breath and pushed the door open, hurrying up the stairs to my apartment. As soon as I was inside, I locked the door, checked it twice, then leaned against it, trying to calm my racing heart. That's when I heard it. A soft scraping sound, like something being dragged across the floor. It was coming from inside my apartment. My eyes darted around the room, looking for the source of the noise. The apartment was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside, casting long shadows across the floor. The scraping sound came again, louder this time, from the direction of the kitchen. I took a cautious step forward, straining to see into the darkened room. My foot brushed against something, and I looked down. My heart lurched. There, on the floor, was a line of white powder, trailing from the front door to the kitchen. I knelt down, touching the powder with my fingertips. Felt gritty like ash. My mind flashed back to the message on the wall in the old apartment, the letters written in what looked like soot or ash. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. Slowly, I stood up and followed the trail of ash to the kitchen. The scraping sound had stopped, and the silence was deafening. I reached the doorway and hesitated, fear clawing at my throat. I flicked on the light, my hand trembling. The kitchen was empty, but the window was open, the curtains fluttering in the breeze. I stared at it, my mind racing. I never left the window open. Never. I stepped closer, peering out into the night. The fire escape was right outside, a dark metal staircase leading down to the alley below. I pulled the window shut and locked it, my hands shaking. Someone had been in my apartment. Someone had left that trail of ash, and I had no idea how they got in or why. I checked the locks on the front door again, then searched the apartment, looking for any signs of a break-in. But everything was as I had left it. I grabbed my phone and called the police, my hands trembling so badly I could barely dial. When the operator answered, I tried to explain what had happened, but the words came out jumbled, frantic. "It's like someone's been in my apartment," I said, my voice shaking. There's ash on the floor and my window was open. I didn't leave it open." The operator asked for my address and said she would send someone over. I hung up, my mind racing. I paced the apartment, checking the locks again and again, until I heard a knock at the door. I jumped, my heart in my throat. "Police!" a voice called out. I opened the door to find two officers standing in the hallway, a man and a woman. They looked at me with concern, and I realized how disheveled I must have appeared. "I'm sorry," I stammered. I don't know what's going on. Someone was in my apartment." The officers came in and looked around. They saw the ash on the floor and the open window. They asked me questions, took notes, but I could tell they didn't believe me. They said there was no sign of forced entry, that it was possible I had left the window open and forgotten about it. "We'll file a report," the male officer said. "But if you don't mind me saying, maybe you should think about talking to someone." I nodded numbly, knowing they wouldn't help me. They left a few minutes later, and I was alone again, the silence pressing in on me. After that night, I started keeping a journal. It was the only way I could think to keep my sanity, to convince myself I wasn't imagining things. I wrote down everything. The noises I heard, the feelings of being watched, the strange occurrences that happened when I was alone. At first, the entries were short, just a few lines each night, but as the days went on, they grew longer, more detailed. I filled page after page with my fears, my suspicions. It was like the act of writing gave my thoughts a place to go, a way to organize the chaos in my mind. But the strange occurrences continued. The ash appeared again, sometimes in small piles near the windows, sometimes scattered across the floor. I would wake up to find my belongings moved, the curtains drawn when I knew I had left them open. One night, I found a handprint on the bathroom mirror, smudged into the condensation. It was too large to be mine, and I felt a chill run down my spine as I stared at it. I wiped it away, but it left a smudge, like a bruise on the glass. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow, my phone clutched in my hand. Every creak of the floor, every rustle of the curtains, set my nerves on edge. I barely slept, and when I did, my dreams were filled with shadows and whispers, indistinct figures standing over me. It was a Friday night, and I was sitting on the couch, my journal open in my lap. I had been writing for hours, trying to make sense of everything, but the words blurred together on the page. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the weight of exhaustion pull at me. I heard a noise behind me, a soft click. I turned around, my heart racing. The apartment was dark, the only light coming from the lamp beside me. I strained my ears, listening. Nothing. I turned back to my journal, trying to ignore the prickling sensation at the back of my neck. I picked up my pen and started writing again, but my hand froze. The words on the page didn't look right. They were jagged, harsh, like they had been written in a rush. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't remember writing them. Get out now. I dropped the pen, my hands trembling. I flipped back through the pages of the journal, my eyes scanning the entries. The words were all there, written in my handwriting. But the more I looked, the more I noticed something was off. Some of the entries weren't mine. The handwriting was slightly different, the tone more frantic. I'm watching you. You can't hide from me. I stared at the words, my skin crawling. I didn't write those. Someone had been in my apartment, had touched my things, had written in my journal. I slammed the book shut, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police again, but something stopped me. The shadow in the corner of the room. I froze, my hand hovering over the phone. The shadow was tall, looming, darker than the rest of the room. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but I could feel its presence, heavy and cold. I felt a scream building in my throat, but I couldn't make a sound. The shadow shifted, and I saw it. A face, pale and gaunt, with dark, hollow eyes staring at me. The figure stepped forward, out of the shadows, and my blood ran cold. It was Lily, or at least it looked like her. Her face was drawn, her eyes sunken, her skin ashen. She opened her mouth, but no words came out, just a low, rasping breath. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. Lily, what are you doing here? The figure didn't answer. It just stared at me, its eyes empty and hollow, and then, slowly, it started to dissolve, fading back into the shadows. I watched, paralyzed with fear, as the darkness swallowed it up, leaving me alone in the room. I sank to the floor, my legs too weak to hold me up. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I had seen. Lily was gone. I knew she was gone. But if that wasn't Lily, then what was it? And why did it look like her? I didn't sleep that night, but the room stayed empty, the shadows still and silent. The next day, I couldn't stay in the apartment. I felt like the walls were closing in on me, the shadows creeping closer. I grabbed my things and left, heading for the only place I could think of. The old apartment building where Lily and I had lived. I had to find out what happened to her. I had to know if she was still there, if she was alive. Maybe she could explain what was happening, why I was seeing things, hearing things. When I got to the building, it looked the same as it always had, old, run down, a little worse for wear. I went inside, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. I reached apartment 3B and knocked on the door, my heart pounding. No answer. I tried the handle, turned easily, and the door swung open. I stepped inside, the air stale and cold. The apartment was empty, just like the building manager had said. But something felt off. The air was thick, oppressive, like a weight pressing down on me. I walked through the apartment, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The walls were bare, the floors dusty. I reached the living room and stopped. There, on the wall, was a message scrawled in ash, just like before. Still here. I backed away, my skin prickling with fear. I turned to leave, but a figure stood in the doorway, blocking my path. I felt my breath catch in my throat. It was Lily. She looked just as she had the night she told me to leave. Pale, gaunt, her eyes dark and hollow. Lily, what happened? Why are you here? She didn't answer. She just stared at me, her eyes empty. Then, slowly, she raised her hand and pointed to the wall. I turned to look, and my blood ran cold. I spun around, but Lily was gone. The apartment was empty, the doorway clear. I stumbled back, my heart racing. I had to get out, had to leave. I ran for the door, but as I reached it, I heard a whisper, low and hissing, like a breath of wind. You belong to me now. The door slammed shut, and the lights went out, plunging me into darkness. I reached for the handle, my fingers scrabbling against the wood, but it wouldn't budge. I felt the air grow colder, the shadows closing in around me. I could hear the whispers again, louder now, filling my ears. I turned, pressing my back against the door, my eyes wide with terror. In the darkness, I saw them. Eyes, dozens of them, watching me from the shadows. They moved closer, surrounding me, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed up by the darkness. The last thing I saw was a figure stepping out of the shadows, a face pale and hollow, eyes dark and empty. And then there was nothing but darkness, and the sound of my own heartbeat, echoing in the silence. I woke up in my own bed, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. The sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the room. I sat up, my mind reeling. It had to have been a nightmare, just a nightmare. But when I looked down, my hand was smeared with ash. My heart skipped a beat, and I stumbled out of bed, backing away from the dark smudges on my fingers. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. There was a message from an unknown number. You can't escape. I dropped the phone, my hands trembling. The words from the wall echoed in my mind, the whispers still ringing in my ears. I knew then that I was never really alone. Whatever had been in that apartment had followed me. And no matter where I went, no matter how far I ran, it would always find me. Because it wasn't just a place that was haunted. It was me. No matter how far you go, no matter how many miles you put between yourself and the place you're trying to forget, the darkness that once entered your life will stay with you forever. It will wait, whispering softly in the night when you're alone, and the light feels so distant. I've come to understand that ghosts aren't tied to places. They're tied to people. And if you've become a part of that darkness, it will always find you. No matter how many times you move, change your phone number, or start over, it will find a way to seep into your mind, to disrupt your peace, and become a part of your existence. The most terrifying realization of all is that in the end, when the darkness finally consumes me, no one will ever know what truly happened. My fear, my horrors will remain mine alone. They will bury me within themselves. And then, maybe, I will become a part of that very darkness that once seeped into my life. Perhaps I will be the one watching someone else, whispering in their dreams, waiting for their fear. Because once you've crossed the line between light and darkness, there is no turning back. The darkness has left its mark on me forever, and now I know there is no escape from it.